Republican socialism, private profit, public risk. When government helps a hungry child, Republicans call it socialism. When government helps a corporation, they call it economic development. Republicans have spent decades warning Americans about socialism, but following the money reveals a very different story. President Harry Truman recognized the tactic more than 70 years ago. In 1952, he noted that Republicans had applied the socialism label to Social Security, farm price supports, bank deposit insurance, public power, and organized labor. Truman said socialism is what they called Social Security. Socialism is their name for almost anything that helps all the people. Truman's point still applies. Help a family afford groceries, expand access to health care, invest in public education, or protect retirement benefits, and some Republican inevitably argues that government is interfering with the free market. But follow the money, and an entirely different system emerges. Republican socialism is the use of public money and government power to protect private profits while leaving the public with the cost and the risk. It does not advertise itself as socialism. It travels under friendlier names: economic development, job creation, tax incentives, parental choice, and business-friendly government. Changing the label does not change the arrangement. Government selects the beneficiaries. Taxpayers provide the support. Private interests receive the financial benefit. Oklahoma provides a particularly revealing case study of how that arrangement operates. Oklahoma's Republican leadership describes its economic philosophy as limited government and free market capitalism. The public record tells a different story. State government decides which businesses receive tax credits, which employers receive payroll subsidies, which industries qualify for special treatment, and which private schools benefit from publicly financed tuition assistance. Those decisions are not the invisible hand of the marketplace described by Adam Smith in his foundational 1776 work, The Wealth of Nations. They are the very visible hand of government. Oklahoma did not refuse to use government to shape its economy. It used government aggressively and directed much of that assistance toward corporations, investors, private institutions, and other influential interests. Oklahoma's annual budget attracts headlines about public schools, healthcare, transportation, and public safety. But another structure operates alongside it. Tax credits, corporate incentives, private school subsidies, special funds, and other commitments approach $1.5 billion, approximately 12 cents for every dollar in Oklahoma's appropriated budget. That is Oklahoma's shadow budget. Some public incentives undoubtedly serve legitimate purposes. A well-designed incentive can attract a high-value employer, support a critical industry, or produce measurable benefits for taxpayers. But an incentive should not be judged simply by whether a corporation accepted it. It should be judged by whether Oklahomans received enough in return for their tax dollars. If Oklahoma's economic development strategy were succeeding for ordinary families, median household income would be rising fast enough to narrow the gap with the rest of the country. The data show the opposite. Oklahoma's median household income is $65,039. The national figure is $80,734. The difference is $15,695 per household. The typical Oklahoma household earns approximately 19% less than the typical American household. The poverty rate tells a similar story: 14.9% in Oklahoma, compared with 10.6% nationally. From 2018 through 2023, Oklahoma's inflation-adjusted median household income grew only 3.2%. Nationally, it grew 6.4%. Oklahoma households gained ground at only half the national pace. That is not an economy catching up. It is an economy falling further behind. When a state already trails the national median by nearly $16,000, growing at half the national rate does not close the gap. It widens it. If Oklahoma continues pursuing the same low-cost, low-wage development strategy, that gap will become harder, not easier, to overcome. Oklahoma's own evaluators have identified one reason families are falling behind. The Quality Jobs Program offers qualifying companies cash rebates of up to 5% of newly created payroll for as long as 10 years. Under its existing structure, eligible employers can qualify by paying either the applicable county average wage or a statewide threshold, whichever is lower. The Incentive Evaluation Commission identified the statewide qualifying threshold as $37,785 during the period it reviewed. That means a company operating in a county with higher average wages can receive public support while paying workers less than the average wage already earned in that community. The Commission recommended eliminating the alternative statewide threshold and requiring participating companies to pay at least the county's average wage. Its reasoning was straightforward. Public incentives should encourage jobs that at least maintain local wage levels. That is not a partisan accusation. It is an economic conclusion contained in the state's own evaluation records. Under the existing arrangement, the company receives assistance, the state claims new jobs, and politicians celebrate economic development. But taxpayers are helping finance employment that does not even match what workers in the same county already earn. A strategy that rewards employers for inexpensive labor should not leave anyone surprised when household incomes remain low. Oklahoma created the Incentive Evaluation Commission in 2015 to provide objective evaluations of the state's economic incentive programs. Its purpose is to examine whether tax credits and subsidies accomplish their stated goals, evaluate their financial and economic effects, and recommend whether programs should be retained, changed, or discontinued. Oklahoma already has an official mechanism for asking whether taxpayers receive a return on their investment. The problem is that an evaluation is not the same thing as reform. The Commission can identify weaknesses, recommend stronger wage standards, and call for better reporting. But it cannot rewrite state law. That responsibility belongs to the legislature. The Quality Jobs Program illustrates an important distinction. The Commission's review concluded that the program generated an estimated positive fiscal return overall, with slightly more than $2 in state revenue for every dollar invested under the model used in its evaluation. The argument is not that every incentive fails. Even a program producing an estimated positive return can allow below-average local wages, concentrate benefits geographically, and leave taxpayer safeguards weaker than they should be. The problem is poorly targeted spending, avoidable costs, weak accountability, and subsidies that continue without sufficient evidence that taxpayers receive the best available return. From 2019 through 2024, Oklahoma County received approximately $163 million in quality jobs rebates, while Tulsa County received approximately $143 million. Together, those two counties accounted for about 82% of the total. If the Quality Jobs Program is promoted as statewide economic development, rural Oklahomans have a legitimate reason to ask why approximately 4 out of every 5 rebate dollars are concentrated in the 2 largest metropolitan counties. A statewide program should demonstrate statewide results. The Commission identified another problem in the home office insurance premium tax credit. Between tax years 2020 and 2024, it reported 6 instances in which an insurer claimed the credit while reporting fewer employees than the previous year. A company received a state incentive while its employment declined. Evaluators warned that the insurance incentive was tied to premiums rather than the jobs or payroll supposedly supporting its economic development rationale. They recommended redesigning the credit around payroll or considering a revenue-neutral alternative. The next question is why identifying the problem has not been enough to produce action. The Commission's review of the 21st Century Quality Jobs Program exposes another important distinction. The program supports higher-paying employment and generated substantial estimated economic activity. The evaluation identified more than $3.1 billion in total economic output and approximately $663.4 million in direct labor income. The same evaluation calculated a net fiscal cost to the state of $24.3 million. Both findings can be true. An incentive can be associated with significant economic activity while still costing the state treasury more than the state tax revenue attributed to it. $1 billion in economic activity is not the same thing as $1 billion in public revenue. The evaluation also reported that 97.9% of 21st Century Quality Jobs rebates were generated in Oklahoma County, with another 1.8% in Tulsa County. That leaves approximately 0.3% for the rest of the state. A program concentrated almost entirely in 2 metropolitan counties is not the same thing as a statewide economic development strategy. The Commission's findings reveal a deeper contradiction. In reviewing aerospace incentives, evaluators reported that the number of engineering degrees awarded by Oklahoma public institutions declined from 2,814 in 2018 to 2,140 in 2024. That is a reduction of 674 degrees, or approximately 24%. Oklahoma's aerospace industry continues to face a shortage of qualified engineering and technical workers. The state is spending public money to attract and retain employers that need highly trained workers while the pipeline producing those workers shrinks. Budget priorities direct substantial resources toward tax credits and absorb revenue losses from income tax cuts instead of making sufficient investments in education. The federal government can borrow to cover revenue lost to tax cuts. Oklahoma cannot operate the same way. Instead, the state effectively borrows against its future by underinvesting in public education, healthcare, nutrition, and the workforce needed to raise household incomes. The obligation returns as fewer trained workers, weaker public services, lower household incomes, and a widening economic gap. A state serious about raising wages would strengthen public education, expand access to affordable post-secondary training, and help more young people complete university degrees, community college programs, career tech credentials, and skilled trade preparation. Those investments support employers and directly benefit Oklahoma families. An educated workforce is an asset the entire state can use. Republican Senator Dave Rader introduced Senate Bill 1403 to address weaknesses identified in the Quality Jobs Program. Qualifying companies would have to meet the applicable county wage threshold rather than relying on a lower statewide alternative, and businesses would face a shorter deadline for filing rebate claims. Both changes reflected concerns identified in Oklahoma's incentive evaluations. The wage provision would help prevent taxpayers from subsidizing jobs paying less than the local average. The filing deadline would improve accountability and reduce uncertainty about public obligations. The Senate passed the bill by a vote of 32 to 15. Then the legislation went to the House, where its original reform language was replaced. The Senate's own summary states that the House version completely replaces the original language. Instead of retaining the original wage and filing reforms, the rewritten legislation expanded eligibility to additional industries, including agribusiness, rail transportation, and inland water transportation. The House passed the rewritten version by a vote of 51 to 41. The measure returned to the Senate, but the legislative record shows no final Senate approval. It did not become law. A bill introduced to strengthen taxpayer safeguards became a bill expanding who could qualify for the subsidy. The protections disappeared, and the existing system remained intact. Democratic Senator Julia Kurt has also pursued reforms aimed at strengthening oversight of business incentives. The fact that a Republican and a Democrat both identified the need for stronger accountability should have made reform easier. Instead, the episode illustrates how difficult it can be to change a system when beneficiaries have lobbyists, organized industry representation, and direct access to the legislative process. Oklahoma's own evaluators identified a weakness. A legislator attempted to correct it. The reform was rewritten. The weakness remained. That is how a shadow budget protects itself. Oklahoma's parental choice tax credit operates on the same principle. Government determines which private expenses deserve public support. For the 2026 through 2027 school year, Oklahoma increased the program's authorized limit to $275 million. Eligible families can receive between $5,000 and $7,500 per student. Even households with incomes above $250,000 can qualify for a $5,000 credit per child. The Oklahoma Tax Commission explains that checks are sent directly to participating private schools, where taxpayers can sign them over for tuition and fees. A family earning more than $250,000 can receive publicly supported private school assistance, while direct support for lower-income families is routinely criticized as government dependency. Families are entitled to choose private schools. The question is why taxpayers should finance that choice for households earning several times Oklahoma's median household income. The same double standard applies to tax policy. Republican candidates often promise that tax cuts will attract businesses, create jobs, and eventually generate enough economic growth to benefit everyone. But tax cuts are not free. When revenue falls short, someone must absorb the difference through additional federal debt or weaker state public services. Republicans privatize the immediate benefit of tax cuts but socialize the resulting debt, service reductions, and future repayment obligations. That is not a free market. It is a public financing arrangement in which the benefits are private and the costs are shared. In Oklahoma, the consequences are measurable. A state where median household income trails the national figure by nearly $16,000 cannot reasonably claim that repeated tax reductions and corporate incentives have produced broadly shared prosperity. A state where household income growth runs at half the national rate cannot simply promise that benefits will trickle down eventually. Why does a system with such uneven results remain politically durable? Part of the answer is that its beneficiaries are organized. Corporations and industry groups employ lobbyists. Business interests support political action committees. Outside organizations finance campaign advertising. Candidates promoting industry-friendly legislation can benefit from substantial outside political spending. The Supreme Court Citizens United decision expanded the ability of corporations and unions to make independent political expenditures. Related decisions helped create the modern environment for heavily financed outside political groups. That does not mean every contribution purchases an official act, and financial support alone does not prove a quid pro quo. The people with the greatest financial stake in government decisions often have the greatest ability to influence campaigns and shape legislation. A working family struggling with housing costs does not usually have a lobbyist at the Capitol. A rural hospital cannot necessarily finance statewide advertising. A public school parent cannot easily threaten a lawmaker with a multimillion-dollar primary campaign. A serious economic development strategy would ask whether median household incomes are rising faster than the national average, whether subsidized jobs pay at least the prevailing local wage, and whether rural communities receive a meaningful share of public investment. Most importantly, it would ask whether a young family can afford a home, healthcare, childcare, and a future. Oklahoma does not need to eliminate every incentive. It needs to stop treating every subsidy as an unquestionable success. The state should adopt credible evaluation recommendations, require stronger wage standards, measure actual taxpayer returns, and make workforce development, public education, healthcare, and family affordability central to economic policy. The choice is not between capitalism and socialism. It is between an economy designed to produce private benefits for selected interests and an economy designed to create opportunity for the people who live here. When government helps a hungry child, Republicans call it socialism. When government helps a corporation, they call it economic development. For years, Republicans have asked voters to fear government assistance. The better question is why their concern disappears the moment the recipient has a corporate logo, a private school enrollment form, or a lobbyist. Oklahoma families deserve more than another promise that corporate benefits will eventually trickle down. Follow the money at wlangdon.substack.com. Coming next, Oklahoma senators tried to protect taxpayers. The Department of Commerce, lobbyists, and House Republicans protected the system. Our next article examines the efforts of Republican Senator Dave Rader and Democratic Senator Julia Kurt to strengthen bipartisan accountability and ensure public money supports programs delivering the best results for taxpayers, not merely the companies collecting tax credits.